Hello, I'm Chris Moon, a fellow artist manager myself, and I will be your guide through tough love, adventures in artist management. Today we speak with Ben Weber from Pressure Management. Ben manages one of my all-time favorite bands, Nada Surf, who recently put out yet another stellar album in their already impressive canon of work. While I've known Ben for over 20 years, and I consider him one of my closest manager confidants, I love that this conversation gave us the opportunity to dig into his history within the music industry and uncover what led him to become an artist manager. We also discussed the challenges of marketing consistently great artists in an era where attention spans are razor thin. Here's our chat, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening.
This is Ben Weber. I am the owner and sole employee of Pressure Management, based in Brooklyn, New York, and I currently work with Nada Surf and Jesse Terry.
Awesome. Well, man, so great to chat with you today, Ben. As
Thanks,
always,
Chris.
we're old friends, and you're actually a go-to for me when I need advice or perspective, which I can't thank you enough for. And I think it's gosh, I mean, we're going on 20 years knowing each other. I think maybe more.
Oh
now.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, but here we are, still kicking it.
Still doing it.
Still doing it.
Yep.
One of the things I've been asking everybody in this first season of Tough Love is, where your kind of origin story is, if you will, as an artist manager, and how you ended up into this, kind of leaning into this crazy gig supporting artists. So do you mind taking us back to some of the early parts of your career and where your entry point was into becoming a manager?
Yeah. Well, I guess I started thinking about a career in the music business when I was in college at a small business school in Rhode Island that I'd gone to thinking I wanted to be an accountant. And I quickly realized I did not want to be an accountant, and I had been spending most of my time at the school at the college radio station, DJing. I was music director for a little bit, and going to shows in Providence. And I'd always been a music fan, and I started to think that once I realized I didn't want to be an accountant, that I would be better off doing something that I was excited and passionate about. And I started to think about, there must be there is a music business, and I needed to go figure out what that business consisted of. And so I transferred to NYU, where I was a journalism and communications major, but I also started working for the college programming office and booking concerts on the campus. And at the same time, interning for an artist manager who I met soon after my arrival in New York. And as I got ready to graduate school, even though I had been working for this artist manager, my goal at the time was to get a job at a record company. And so this was like 90 or 91. And so a couple months after graduating, I got a gig at a company called Seed Records, which was an Atlantic Records subsidiary, which was supposed to be their like alternative indie label. And it was me and like one or two other people, so I just ended up doing everything, whether it was radio promotion, retail promotion, tour marketing, and trying to learn as much about the different aspects of a record company as possible. And I was making no money, living with my grandma in Queens, but I was just so excited to be getting free CDs in the mail every day and free tickets to concerts, so I didn't really care, and it was just it was a really exciting time. And I stayed there for a couple of years, and then moved over to Elektra Records, which was a label that I'd always wanted to work at because a lot of my favorite bands were signed to the label. And I stayed there again, like probably 2 years, but it was while I was there that I met the Not a Surf guys.
Oh,
And
okay.
actually was given their demo by a friend of mine I worked with named Bobby McCain, who had seen them at a small club the night before and really liked them and got a demo tape from them. And he, said, you should really check this out. And for the next 2 or 3 days, I just listened to this demo cassette over and over, and loved it. And then I had become friendly with an A&R person at the label, and I asked Bobby if he was okay with me playing it for him, which he was. And so I marched up to this guy's office, put the cassette in, and I think the second song or third song was popular, and the guy said, that song's a hit, let's sign this band, and kind of brought me along in meeting the Not a Surf guys, and that turned out to be very fortuitous, because 6 years later, I ended up managing them, and they became like my first meaningful management client. But before then, I left Elektra Records soon after the first Not a Surf record came out, because I was always going to be an assistant there and probably was never going to be promoted. And somehow I became the label manager for a UK-based label called Dedicated. And I went from being an assistant in the marketing department at Elektra to helping run this small, very cool label. They put out Spiritualized Records, The Cranes, and
Beth Orton?
A year after we started the U.S. office, we got the Beth Orton record, Trailer Park, and that got a lot of attention, and at the same time, I think got me a lot of attention because Dedicated was a small U.S. office, and so we were out there really pushing this record, and I think that's when people started to kind of notice me. But Dedicated, which was owned by BMG, wasn't around much longer after we finished working that first record. And so it was pretty obvious that the U.S. office was going to be closed down, and there was not a lot of work happening. And at the time, I'd started thinking about doing management, because even though it was still not 100% clear to me what a manager did on a day-to-day basis, I recognized that was the role where you were dealing the closest with artists, and so I thought that would be really interesting and exciting and a good experience. And our mutual friend Jason Wilkins turned me on to Nielsen Hubbard, who had recently put out a record on Adam Duritz's label and didn't have a ton of stuff going on, but I really loved the record, and I heard that he was looking for a manager, so I took the train down to Philadelphia one day and met with Nielsen, and he became my first management client.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember those days. You and I actually met through Jason when Jason's band was signed to Dedicated and put out a single. I remember seeing you and Jake in that office in New York, probably during a CMJ sometime around that time frame. But the piece of this story that I wasn't aware of was your time at Elektra. I guess I knew about your time at Dedicated, but I didn't know your history prior to that, so didn't realize that you guys had connected, and you played a role actually very early in your career in getting them signed to Elektra.
Yeah.
Who was the A&R guy there, if you don't mind me asking?
It was Josh Deutsch.
That's what I figured. Yeah, because Josh was signing pretty much all the really good stuff coming out of Elektra, Super Drag and stuff like that at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've known the Not a Surf guys going on 25 years.
Wow.
But after Dedicated closed down, I got like a consulting gig for a Capitol Records label called Odeon, and we put out, again, it was supposed to be like Capitol Records independent label, and we were going to release records by artists that had been signed by Capitol but weren't exactly ready for like the big Capitol machine. But soon after I started working there, Capitol started going through some major executive changes. And I again realized that the label wasn't going to be around much longer. At that time, while I was doing that, I started to co-manage a band from Lawrence, Kansas called The Ultimate Fake Book with a buddy of mine who were signed to 550 Records, which was an Epic Records subsidiary. So I was working with them, and when the Capitol Records gig was about to end, I just started to get a feeling like I did not want to work for another record company. I thought that the labels weren't as fun as they used to be when I started working in the music business, and it just seemed like they were going through some tough times. And this is right around 2001, and just as digital distribution was starting to pick up, and really without giving it much thought, I decided to kind of hang out my shingle as a manager, and I had this band Ultimate Fake Book. They had turned me on to a Kansas City band called The People, who then became the Golden Republic, and around that time, Not a Surf were finishing up their album Let Go, and they had left their manager and were looking for someone to work with and help them with this new album. And we'd remained very, very friendly since after I left Elektra, and were in touch, and they knew I was doing management full time, and they asked me to start working with them, which the timing was just perfect because they had this great record which was going to relaunch their career, and I was trying to relaunch my career as well, and it's worked out really, really nicely for the last 17, 18 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's great how that relationship circled back around in the process. That's fascinating. I have this memory, and this might not, you can verify if this is correct, but I remember being over in London waiting to catch a flight at Gatwick, I think, and you had emailed me Let Go while I was over in London, and you were, in my mind at least, this is how I remember it, you were like, what do you think? Should I work this? What do you think of this record, essentially? And I remember listening to it and getting through Blizzard of 77 and then getting into the second song going, oh my God, this is so good. And I think my response back to you, well, if you don't, I will, because it was just such a classic record, from the very get-go. And from the first listen, for me at least. And I was familiar with the band. I remember Popular, but I didn't follow the record after that. And I really... and I guess give some context too, and again, this is just my own perception, but I think they unfortunately were kind of lumped into a band or a lot of bands from, say, the mid to late 90s that had a big radio hit but never really followed up on it. You could argue that Radiohead fell into this category for a hot minute too, but, there was definitely kind of a disconnect there, but, clearly they were on a path and they had made a really brilliant record. And that's worn out over time, but that's kind of my own personal memory of that initial kind of connection and hearing that record for the first time.
Yeah, I have a very similar story with another friend of mine named Jeff Barrett, who runs Heavenly Records in the UK,
Hmm.
where we were both in LA at the same time. I went up to his hotel room. I played in Blizzard of '77, maybe Blonde on Blonde, and before I think before the first song was over, he was like, "Ben, this is brilliant. I want to put this out." And when I saw that kind of reaction, that immediate reaction, it's very clear that this was going to be a good project to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Those kind of records don't come along very often, in my experience.
Yeah,
So to be able to play a role in that, and so early in the process, and then, like you said, perfect timing really for both you and the band,
hmm
and all that previous experience, working with Nielsen and the People and all those other artists you just mentioned, probably gave you enough context. So in addition to your label experience, you knew exactly at that point probably what you were getting into and what that what that ride would look like on some level.
yeah, yeah. It was nice to have that base
Right. Right.
to start doing management from.
Yeah. So what was it like, kind of taking that initial reaction that you were getting from that record and then doing the hard work that ultimately we all have to do, even when you have a great piece of art, as far as finding it a home, and accentuating it in the way that you needed to see it, kind of
But
carve out some success.
by the time I got involved, they had a manager in Europe who was based in France, where the band had a very large audience, and he had already gotten. He was very close at that time that I got involved to getting the band a deal with a company called Labels, which was a part of EMI France, for Europe. And then when I got involved, I was able to bring Heavenly in the UK on board, who were also distributed by EMI. And the band had already been in the process of meeting with Barsuk Records in Seattle by the time I started working with them. So that was already kind of moving forward. And, it wasn't like we were out there trying to find. The band was, because of what their experience was with Elektra, they were more interested in finding the right people that they
Right.
wanted to work with. And at the time, Barsuk had been putting out Death Cab records for a while, which, and I think Matthew and Josh from the record company really connected. So the band wasn't really interested in really shopping for a deal in America. So that was already in place by the time I got involved. And then we did something at that time, which I don't think you can do these days, which is the record was originally released in Europe and the UK in September of 2002. And we held off on the US release until February of 2003. And I don't think you could do that these days because of
Yeah,
the
it's more of a
digital.
flat world. Yeah.
Yeah, but by doing that, the band had all of this great coverage coming back from England, from Europe, that was reaching people in America. So by the time we were ready to go out with the album here, there was a really big feature in the New York Times about the band and the album release. There was, just a lot more excitement by the time we put it out over here.
Yeah, that's always helpful and a gift to have, and certainly in
Yeah,
that era too, having that in particular. Like I'm thinking of like Mojo and Uncut, some of the UK magazines, press outlets really did carry a lot of weight, I think, for a certain segment of music fans here in the States.
yeah,
Um,
definitely. The other thing I would say is that soon after Let Go came out, it's when you started to hear a lot of really good alternative music in TV shows.
Oh, true.
So the band started seeing a lot of income and just visibility from film and TV licensing, because commercial radio wasn't playing that record, but we certainly were able to reintroduce the band to a lot of people from licensing and touring.
Right, right. Was Jackie on board when you came aboard too, on the touring front, or? Yeah, that's probably been a pretty critical piece, I think, as well. I was a fan of the record. I've already kind of gloated about that, but I mean, seeing them live was a whole other experience. It kind of took it to a whole different level for me. I mean, they still are in a lot of ways one of my favorite bands to go and see play. Like I would not miss the opportunity to go and watch an Auto Surf show. But I know I'm not alone in that. I know that, they've definitely been able to retain and carve out a strong fan base based on their consistency in playing.
Right. I think that's certainly the case, and I always marvel at the fact that this band can be on stage for almost 2 hours, and the set list is like there's no letdowns. There's never any time where like I want to walk away, and there's the quality of the songwriting over the years is just so strong, and also I give them so much credit because they still love playing these shows after 25 years, and I feel like most bands can get away with 70, maybe 90 minutes, and Not a Surf can like consistently go out and play for 2 hours, and it's a great show.
Yeah, and you won't even necessarily hear all the songs you want to hear in that 2 hour time frame because there's so many.
Exactly. Well, the crazy thing is, after playing a 2 hour show, Matthew, the lead singer, will go out to the merch table with his guitar, and he'll play another like 1 or 2 songs. Which is usually like fan requests, because the band wasn't able to get to the song they wanted to hear on stage.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and so endearing to see as well.
Yeah, they definitely don't take it for granted, and they're appreciative of their audience.
Yeah, and I think their audience picks up on that. It's a very sincere relationship in that regard. They're certainly a band you want to root for and see good things happen. But yeah, I did want to touch on just the consistency from Let Go, that album that kind of reinstated them in a way, through the record will be coming out next year. I mean, I think there's very few artists in my mind that occupy a space where, for me at least, I want to hear all their work. I want to hear their newest work. And I know going into it, it's going to be as good, if not better, than everything else I've heard. There's a certain level of comfortability. It's like seeing an old friend, or, putting on an old pair of shoes or something. I don't know how to describe it, but it's definitely, there's a level of consistency there and craft that is very inviting. Which, few artists really are able to touch on. But I think that goes back to, what we were just talking about, just the consistency and level of songwriting and performance that is there when, going out. Probably, I imagine on this next tour, picking 2 hours worth of tunes is going to be a challenge when you pepper in another 2 or 3 or 4 more, from the new record that need to be added to that canon. I mean, that's just it's a beautiful place to be able to be at, I'm sure as their career continues to unfold. What are some of the challenges based on that kind of consistency? Because, I mean, it's really, on one hand, it's really great to know that, but it also has a tendency to potentially breed I guess a certain amount of not apathy per se, but just like comfortability, and kind of how you break and build beyond that mold. What have you guys been able to do beyond, kind of leaning into the tried and true, probably people that like them consistently oppress, the consistent touring component? Like, how do you engage and find new fans, essentially?
That's a battle that we face every time these guys put out a new record. Um, every time we get ready to put out a record, the question that we get from the label, the publicist, is what's the story? And after all this time, it's really hard to find the angle or the story to tell around each record. And it's important because going out with like another really good Not a Surf record each time, it doesn't move the needle. You have to find other ways. And honestly, like, social media has been critical in helping us move forward and grow the audience because you get these people who kind of feel like you do, Chris, and are rooting for the band. They I don't know, they not really raise their voice, but they are out there online talking about the band and about the records. And it's amazing how many times you see, oh, Not a Surfer still putting out records? I only know them from Popular. I'm going to go check them out now.
Wow.
It's shocking, after all this time. But until we get like a big break or or like lightning strikes, that's what we've been relying on, which is just releasing quality, authentic music and going out and playing great shows. The problem, or part of the problem, is making great records isn't a fast process. And there are year-long gaps in between the band's releases. And so, you have to figure out ways to remain visible, while also, giving the band time to write. They're older. Most of them have families, so they need to, that's key as well. So it's very challenging.
Yeah, I kind of recall, I think this was in between album cycles. We were talking previously about, making and doing covers. And not only recording cover songs, but, peppering them into sets and whatnot. There's two covers that they've done that come to mind, in thinking about the sync opportunities too. If I recall, didn't they do a Beatles cover for a commercial, and then they also had a cover of a Pixie song that get picked up and used in a commercial as well? Am I remembering correctly on those?
Oh,
and
yeah.
didn't those fall in between album periods too, to some degree, to kind of fill those gaps a little bit and raise visibility and awareness through tapping into, the kind of, familiarity with these songs already?
Yeah, the Chase commercial, I believe, happened in 2006, after The Weight Is a Gift was released. And I think that took people by surprise. I don't think they were expecting to hear Not a Surf there. And then a couple years ago, completely out of the blue, we got a request for their cover of Where's My Mind by the Pixies to be used in a Samsung commercial. And that came, soon after the band had ended their touring cycle, or actually right around the time that the band ended the touring cycle of You Know Who You Are, their last studio record. And I think that also got the band and the cover um, a lot of visibility. And honestly, the money from that license allowed us to take a more leisurely pace for creating new music and getting a new record out. So that was a luxury that we were not expecting to have.
No, it's a great byproduct, of getting that exposure, but also, getting a little bit of more of a comfortable condition, if you will, financially to allow for what you just described. I mean, that's kind of in the background, right? But it's a nice 1-2 punch to have that. And,
You don't want to. It's horrible to have to like rush a record out, or
right.
rush the recording or the writing process. So to have that extra time, I think benefits the next album.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, yeah, obviously we've been focusing a lot on Not a Surf, and my fandom's shown through. But I wanted to circle back around to Jesse Terry as well. When did you first bump into Jesse?
Um, it was soon after my son was born, so it was the summer of 2014.
Right. And Jesse's career is kind of in a different trajectory in some respects than when you came in on Not a Surf. So, but I as a manager, fellow manager, I've been really impressed with the work that both you and Jesse do, and I just wanted to get some insight as to how that working relationship goes.
It's really different than Not a Surf. Um, Jesse works just as hard on the business side of his career as the music side. When I got involved with him, he didn't have booking agents. He really had no help at all, and he had been doing everything. And he'd be doing it really well for an artist with no agent. He was playing a lot of shows, um, you know, and I thought he was making really strong records that weren't getting any attention. Um, so that's why I was that. I guess there were a number of reasons why I wanted to get involved with him. Two, he's a great guy, and he's somebody you want to spend time with and work with. He had I first found his name through Nielsen Hubbard's website, who had produced one of his records. And so Nielsen totally vouched for him, said he was a great guy, good to work with. And it turned out he was from this little town in Connecticut, which was really, very close to the town that I grew up in. And I was just really surprised that, an artist was living in Stonington, Connecticut, this beautiful kind of Connecticut coastal town. So I know all those things came together, and Jesse and I met, and he was just somebody I really wanted to help out. And so since I've worked with Jesse, I've been able to bring on agents for the world. He's put out a number of records and EPs. We've run some very successful fan funding projects, and the guy just continues to work incredibly hard. And so,
yeah, no, it's definitely my impression of him too. He seems like that new kind of tenor of artists that, like you said, get involved on the business side, aren't afraid to get their hands dirty, and are passionate about that component of their career.
Yeah, I just think he's very motivated. He's very ambitious in terms of wanting to do this as a career, and also wanting to grow and develop as an artist. it's something that he thinks about a lot and puts a lot of time and effort into.
Yeah, and it kind of touches on the one last little thing I wanted to kind of get your perspective on a little bit. For yourself as a manager, but also for the two artists that you are partnered with, how do you define success? Like, is it a group component of this is what we're trying to achieve at this record or at this project, or what level of balancing that kind of nuance of managing expectations while kind of pushing things forward? How is that for both you personally, but also for the artists that you work with?
These days I feel like we're successful just by the fact that we can continue to do this. The fact that I can continue to manage artists, do it on my own. The fact that these guys, none of these artists have day jobs. They're able to make their living from putting out records and touring. And also that I think the quality of the music that they're putting out remains very, very high. And I think that's, I think we're deemed a success by those marks. I can't say that I was satisfied with the response to, the Last Not a Surf record, or even Jesse's last couple records, but I don't consider them unsuccessful or consider us unsuccessful, because I think that the needle continues to move in the right direction for both of them.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective. I mean, it is hard to hone in on, because we're all ambitious in any project we work on, but it is hard to kind of put that in perspective. And I love what you just touched on there, as far as like being financially independent enough to focus on your craft on both sides of it, both for yourself and then for the artists that you work with. I think that's a huge, major touchstone for defining success. And it doesn't limit the idea of trying to push the needle further, and trying to strive for more opportunity in the future too. Mm-hmm. I think that's a healthy balance and a great way to look at things. Well, Ben, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to chat through all
Thanks,
this.
Man.
It's speaking for myself, our friendship and your mentoring for me as a manager has been huge in so many ways at so many different times in my career. And I just love the fact that, you're still out there doing amazing work, and that we're able to connect every so often to give mutual appreciation and support, which is needed ever so. More so, it seems like, for us managers. I thank you for that.
It's a tough business and it's a tough time, but I can't think of anything else I would want to do.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. It's like I've done a lot of various things in my career too, but management's been the one consistent thing, and it's the thing that I feel most confident in doing. And there's something to be said for that. I think not dissimilar, I guess, than artists. It's like they're going to create their craft anyway. They're going to mm-hmm. sing and perform and write and create art. So finding a way to do that, effectively and make it rewarding, I guess, is an important component on both sides of the fence. For folks like ourselves doing artist management, supporting artists, and certainly for artists themselves. It's definitely a challenging environment, but it's still, I find a lot of joy still in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the victories kind of feel even sweeter these days.
Yeah.
When you do get them.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Well, man, thanks again. I really do appreciate this. Thanks to our guest, Ben, and thanks to you for allowing us to occupy your ear space today. I'd like to thank my dear friend Tony Miracle for both the theme music and graphics for Tough Love, and I want to dedicate this first season to a truly inspirational manager who passed away last year, Elliot Roberts. Rate us, follow us, and above all, share this podcast with all your friends and fellow music industry and artist communities. It takes a village. You can reach us at chris@anhedoniamanagement.com. That's CHRIS@ANHEDONIAMGMT.com. Be well, trip up, get back up, and let's all learn as we go. Until next time.